Hello, Eric.
Good morning, Remo.
How is your day?
Been excellent so far, but it's only 11:22, so a long way to go. And I hope to use the time efficiently and also have opportunity to talk with you.
Yeah, same here. So, what are we doing here? We are not entirely sure, but one thing is certain is that I wanted to have a discussion with you and have it more than once, because I think that our conversations are interesting and they go in different directions. And I thought that it could be interesting, first of all, to talk to you, because time flies, and why keep our conversations away from everyone else? Maybe they are interested, I don't know. And then I figured that we should do some sort of a format or podcast where we are able to talk about stuff that we care about. Now, what is the specific topics? We will figure it out as we go. So we are default aggressive in terms of taking the first steps of creating this podcast. We don't have a name yet. We don't have specific topics yet. What I know that I like history, you like history, we like leadership, you like leadership. We are leading people. You are a CEO, COO, I'm a CEO. We are collaborating all the time, talking strategy, talking tactics, all that kind of stuff. So that is something what I would like to record and see what happens. And if someone finds it useful, then that's awesome. If not, then at least we got something out from it. And that's the kind of point of this podcast overall. So whoever is listening, let us know what could be the name, what could be the topics. We could take whatever the topic is. If it's interesting to us, we will talk about that as well. So at the moment, our direction is very flexible. So we don't know where we go. We just go. And that's my input, first of all. What you're thinking about what I just said?
Well, we actually had a time to discuss with you the idea. So I agree it's not completely settled down or settled. So what would be the 100% sure format? But I a little bit disagree. So actually we had this idea to talk about history exactly from the perspective of leadership.
By the way, I like when you disagree with me. That's good. All right. So.
That's probably a professional, disease that with a legal background, you always try to say, but as opposite way, or I would like to add. So for me, history and leadership are very much connected. Most of the history books I like to read, they are connected with particular persons. And right now I'm reading a historical leadership book, which comes back to David Ben-Gurion, Churchill, and
already learning.
And yes. Exactly, I'm learning how much the historical success has been a question of micromanaging, by the way, in certain aspects, and how much it was of detachment. So exactly what we talked during our lessons. Mm-hmm. And when you asked me to put together some kind of a short brief for our American partners about the Estonian history, with every chapter I just put together, I thought, wait a minute. Every single chapter of our historical background, even starting from the Ice Age, it's actually about 4 laws of combat, because we wouldn't survive if you don't have, cover and move, for example. And at the same time, most of our, how to be politically correct, not the biggest success stories, unfortunately, has also been a part of not following cover and move. So I hope that from a leadership perspective as well, our discussion would be at least interesting in this way.
Mm-hmm. So absolutely, that's why I liked it. But that's why I already learned when I got your brief, which is 14 pages, of what we will be talking most likely with Americans, or at least we wanted to give them an overview where we're coming from. I already started learning things. It got me interested again in all of those topics because they are interesting, because it's about our ancestry, it's about our history, it's about the place where we live here in the Eastern Europe, or now in Nordic Europe, whatever it is, I don't know. It doesn't matter really. To me, it's just a word. We are just here. This is our piece of land at the moment, and I'm happy that we have that opportunity to live here. But first, when we just get to the topics, maybe few words about your background in 1 minute. What have you done? So the audience who doesn't know who we are or have no idea what we're talking about just gets a reference point of what kind of perspectives they might get based on your profession and where you are in your life.
Thank you. So my name is Erik. I was born 1977 and born in Tallinn, lived here. As far as I remember, from the 4th grade, when we first started the history lessons at first grammar school and later in a high school, history was always my favorite subject. I was pretty shy and introvert child, so historical books was like a kind of a place where to hide in his own, I don't know, romantic and whatever world. After high school, I went in 1996, I went to the police school and been most of my professional life in different police and security services. Also had a chance to serve my nation in the military intelligence and being also the head of customs. And today, beside that I'm privileged to work in Combat Ready, I have also possibility to be a lecturer of law at our military academy. So that's my brief background.
Yeah, so and your father?
My father is actually...
You are a father, right?
I am a father, okay. Sorry, I just thought that you want to explain who my parents are. But yes, I'm a father of 3, so I have one son 25, a daughter 10, and the youngest son 8.
All right, sounds good. So that's a brief background of Erik. My name is Remo, as I said. My background comes from southern Estonia, Tartu, second biggest city in Estonia, 100,000 people, very big city, and raised up in a family of where I was the only child. Then I had a huge mother's side family, 9 children in their family, working in farming, hardworking people. Then on my other side, there was my city grandparents. My grandfather was elite sportsman when they was deported during the 1950s, I would say. Then while being deported, he found sport and then eventually became a champion of Soviet Union in multiple sports. So that's one part where I learned discipline and a lot of decentralized command from the 9-member family from my mother's side, because obviously if you have 9 children, you can't micromanage it. You just have to let it go. And I was I had the ability to be let go. And then eventually I was interested in poker. I did some stuff out there. Then I joined military eventually, which I didn't want to do in the beginning. But eventually I saw that there is a opportunity to join a unit called ESTSOF, which is Estonian Special Operation Forces. I spent 8 years over there. After that, I played another 1.5 years poker, which didn't go as planned. And that led me to the defense industry. I worked in military robotics. I sold their robotic tanks in the Middle East, in Southern Europe. So I got the civilian experience. And then during the time, me and Martin, we founded Combat Ready, where we are at the moment then teaching leadership. And we are partners with Jocko Willink, Cliff Babin, and their company called Echelon Front. And that's what we are doing at the moment here in Europe, teaching leadership and living the principles. And that's how we kind of got here, because of them as well, because that they were the reason why we put together this document. And this document kind of started raising ideas that we should talk about these things. So what we have here in our hands is 14 pages of history of Estonia. So where do you would like to start from?
First, I would like to make a slight comment about this, because while putting together these 14 pages of 5,000 years of Estonian history, that was a pretty challenging, because I had to learn a second rule of second law of
combat.
Of combat, yes, because you have to be simple. You can't write rewrite hundreds of books written about Estonian history. So you had to put it very simple, clear, and concise. Did I manage? I don't know, but 14 pages was probably what I managed to do. Where I would like to start...
Sorry. So as I reminded you about your family, I remind myself that, hey, I also have 2 kids. One of them is 8, other one is 1.5 months old. So I'm also a family man. I'm married.
Excellent. Yes.
Happily married. Hello, wife.
And the same from my side.
So now let's get to history. Right?
Yes, let's get to history. I think that it would be a logical approach, or at least we can't forget this part. I think we should start from the age when our grandfather parents arrived from Ural Mountains to this tiny, small, strange, cold land. How did they get here? Why did they get here?
I have a different opinion. Let's talk about where we are in general picture. What is Estonia? And then as we give the overall general understanding of what Estonia is, where we are, then we can jump into that. What do you think about that?
I agree. Go ahead, Mr. CEO.
So what has this man written down? Who we are, where we are. We are a tiny land of 45,000 square kilometers on the edge of Northern and Eastern Europe, lies on the shores of Baltic Sea, bigger than Denmark, Belgium, Switzerland, and Netherlands. So we are pretty big, actually.
That was ego massage.
Yes.
Ego massage. We are bigger than the Netherlands.
We have about 1.3 million inhabitants. We have forest and bogs, wetlands, covered approximately 40% of our territory. We are forest people. They're forest people, not anymore maybe?
No, when you think about several modern writers actually wrote about our special connection. Valdur Mikita, for example, has written about us as a forest people. So when we think back, we all of us, majority, likes at certain point to go to walk in the forest, in the woods. So I think it's a part of our genetics.
All right, and the reason why is also that forests have saved and covered us in hard times. Even our resistance fighters during the Second World War and after, like from 1940s until the 1950s, hiding from Soviet and Nazi occupation, were called Forest Brothers. Our capital is Tallinn, where lies our Ülemiste Upper Lake. It's above the town. Mysterious Ülemiste Vanake, an old mythological person living in the lake, is angry that the city was built next to the lake. So there was some mythical creature who was angry about...
you can see him on every third Thursday in the month walking on Järvevana Street. Me either.
I haven't seen him. So he wanted to drown the city when the city was completed. That is why when he asked people passing by, is Tallinn finally ready now? The answer is always no, because we are going to be innovating and adapting, I guess. And since the first mention in 1154, or in, I don't know how to say it. 1154 in Tallinn, is constantly growing, changing, developing. So the Ülemiste Vanake must wait, because we are still growing, we are still moving towards. Now, Tallinn is one of the best preserved medieval towns under UNESCO Heritage Protection. The oldest permanent and still functioning pharmacy in the world is here. That's interesting. First mentioned in 1422. Probably medicine has changed. We have 2,317 islands. So we are winning compared to Latvians, right?
Can you please be specific? How many islands Latvian have?
I don't know, 0?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So we have 2,370 more. So that's why we do here with neighbors. We are always comparing things. We are still friends. But as good friends, they always poke each other. And our highest mountain is 380 meters. So that's not really a mountain. It's a egg hill, actually.
Great egg hill. Suur Munamägi.
Yeah. Actually, we love our southern neighbors. As we just said, we have fought and suffered together, shared destiny, losses and victories. Our languages are totally different, but most of the traditions are very alike. With our northern neighbors, Finns, so Finland is up in the north, we are so close that we are probably the only nation in the world who can say that even the music of our national anthem is the same. So this is really weird. We have the exact same music for our anthems, which is pretty wild. What else is here? Which is the lyrics are different. So even the music of our national anthem is the same. No surprise that during Soviet occupation in 1940 until 1991. This is just wild reading it. We were occupied 51 years. It's pretty fucking crazy. We love to watch TV and see Finnish team winning, especially in the ice hockey against the USSR. Of course, we liked it. Our climate is usually mild thanks to the sea, but in the winter there might be a lot of snow, and the temperature falls below minus 30 degrees. And I can say that it's pretty bad. And it sucks. And we have here one Australian as well sitting there, and he understands how bad the minus 30 is compared to Australian weather. Tallinn and Alaska are on the same parallel, I guess, latitude, 59th. Sun does not set in June, but it's hard to see sunlight in December. So we have a really long summer, very short days in the winter, so it sucks. We are living in a cave, like in a forest almost. So welcome to Estonia. We have flag, which is blue, black and white. We have our coats of arms. We are located here next to our big friend Russia. And we have our own language, which is pure Estonian. It's just like a cryptic language. Nobody understands it but us. There's only 1 million people who understand it pretty much. Roughly 1 million people speak this language. It comes from Finno-Ugric languages originating from the Ural Mountains. Who knows that? Who can fact check that it came from the Ural Mountains?
Probably it's possible to check based on a research that we still have many of our relatives. Mordvas, Moksha, Ersa, and other tiny nations, Komis, Udmurtis, who still live there. And when we trace back the roots of our language, so the grammar is pretty much the same. We have many words which originated from the same tree. But of course, when you ask, okay, average Estonian does not exist, but when we go on the street and ask, hey, how much you feel that you are relative for the Udmurti people living in Ural Mountains, I doubt that most of the people walking on the street will say, yes, of course, that's my closest relatives.
I have never heard the words that you just spoke, so I would not know. So continuing, our relatives are Finns and Hungarians. However, through the times, our language has changed a lot. So today we understand probably 60% of the Finnish language without translation, but almost no words of Hungarian language. However, our very complicated grammar with 14 cases is the same. Some of the words probably came with us from Ural fishing, and water were part of our life. So kala means fish in Estonian, kala in Finnish, hal in Hungarian, vesi water, vettä in Finnish, viis in Hungarian. So there are some similarities. Our languages are hard to mix with other European languages. Öde, night work, majarajaja, house builder. We have many small relative indigenous people of the north, but most of them are fading away. Only 3 of us, Finns, Estonians and Hungarians, established their own independent states. And that's what I would say is kind of the conclusion of where we are at the moment in general. I don't know, would you like to add something?
No, I don't think that I'm on this level where I should add something about our origin. But yes, when you think about our first president after the World War II, Lennart Meri, who was a great scientist and who really researched all the people, so he made several journeys there. And even how we started to construct our canoes or our small boats, which we can still find, for example, in Matsalu National Park, now centuries, thousands of years later, they still origin to the same place. So it's wonder how this distance of several thousands of kilometers still preserve something in common. And I think that's the beauty of the history, that you can find the dots. You can find a thing to think, okay, how they innovated and adapt, which leads us again back to the 4 laws of combat.
Absolutely. And I think also...
I'm sorry, I have to put the parking.
Yeah, put it on parking. I will continue on some of the stuff while Eric is parking his car. Through the mobile phone. Yes, we are digitally innovative. We are able to park through phones here. I think that overall what I could say that Estonia is like a startup to me, because who knew how to build up a country after an occupation, after the Soviet Union collapsed? I would say nobody. There were some people who were smart enough to make steps in the right direction, as we are with this podcast, just starting to do something and see where we go. And we eventually have end up here, and I would say it's a pretty freaking successful startup, the country of Estonia, with a long history, but it didn't start, or the history didn't start only after 91. There was a lot of history before that, and we will first jump into the first settlements and ancient times. So I give you the role of introducing what we're going to talk about in the first settlements and ancient times.
Yeah, thank you. You already mentioned that we are coming from, in the middle of nowhere, of mountains and territory, thousands of kilometers away from here. How we moved here. So, of course, it's pretty hard to find some kind of very well documented maps or something. But again, we as a people of nature, we had to move with the nature. So when the ice started to move away, so that was the first possibility to move here, because most of Estonia used to be the bottom of the sea, of course. And when those small nations, people, I don't know, nation is probably too much to say. We can call ourselves a nation maybe for less than 200 years. 5,000 years ago, we arrived here. Probably we have had some people here before, which we don't know much about the origin, because the first settlements date back 10,000 years ago here. But anyway, the people we are today, so Finno-Ugric people, 5,000 years ago settled here. And probably we mixed to a certain extent, because scientists say that certain names like, Pärnu, for example, is borrowed. Again, just a speculation. What is important from my point of view, or what is actually created our way of thinking maybe, our national character, that we happen to be, and we still are, on this edge between the Eastern and Western civilization. And that has been a part of our history in a good or bad sense through the thousands of years. So some mythical way we survived, and we will definitely go through this topic, but I would think that has been part of our genetics, that we happen to be on this edge of two different and very big worlds.
And obviously, what happened 5,000 years ago, who knows? This is just allegedly. Who knows better? Let us know. We would like to understand better if you know. And then, as you said, that Estonians didn't consider themselves as one nation at that time. Some regions like our islands, Saaremaa, the biggest one, was the home of Estonian Vikings. Yes, we also went across the sea and fought great battles. Even the ancient important trading centers of Sweden, Sigtuna, was burned down by us. That's a success, right?
No, yeah, of course. When you don't have this history of many kings and kingdoms, of huge battles, then of course it has to be some kind of an ego massage. Hey, wait a minute, we have all also been a part of this great Viking history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And who wouldn't want to be a part of Vikings, right?
Yes, of course, inland people somewhere in the middle of forest and bogs couldn't be, but yes, of course, our islands had this opportunity.
And what has found out is that there are unique burial places, unbelievably well preserved Viking ships dated from 700 AD with buried 41 bodies and equipment, helmets, swords. It was found decades ago from our islands. So we must be Vikings, right?
That's definitely proved that Estonian Vikings from islands has been pretty dangerous visitors for our neighbors across the sea.
And what is written here is that don't mess with Saaremaa people, because they will bury you.
They will definitely have negative impact on your economical centers.
But they will bury you together with the boat, so that's fine. So our religion was connected by the nature, spirits of trees, and I would say that's also very similar, at least what we understand what the Vikings did.
Yes, and that's probably, we have had it before Vikings, because when we again jump back to this ancient nations or our small relatives across the Ural mountains. So, for example, after hunting of a brown bear, you had to bury his head. So there is a funeral of the bear, and spirits of the trees and rivers and stuff. So being very much connected to this nature that has always been a part of our religion.
And I would say that, but the main god was Tara, so Tarapita, who drove on the lightning in the skies. Here one can see a close connection with the Scandinavians, god Thor, but one event which probably had a huge influence on this belief was Kali meteorite about 1500 BC. Explosion was probably here in Poland. It destroyed a significant part of Saaremaa Island and created a lake. Many legends in Europe use this story about different gods arriving on the firehouse. So if something comes out from the sky, at that time I can only imagine that there has to be a story about gods who did that kind of thing, because there was no understanding of what's going on in our universe and stuff like that. So that's where many of those legends start. Those legends are highly likely related to Kali meteorite. As I said, our second president, scientist and writer Lennart Meri has written a book about those times, which is called Silver White, trying to find the answer where the mythical land of Ultima Thule is, the land where the sun goes to rest. What was the story? Have you read the book?
Yes, Silver White and more Silver White. He actually had two books, very interesting, and they both describe the story. So Estonia already in this time, even we cannot call it a state as Estonia, but this region had a huge impact on development and different legends and way of thinking in our region, because Tara and Tarapita and Thor and all these Scandinavian legends and stuff, it means we were very much interconnected. So we did not live in some kind of isolated place. And what I like to think from this time that it was a giving and taking. So we gave something from our national heritage and we also received. So when you think back about our background, so who can you actually call a pure Estonian? The thing does not exist, because through all these thousands of years mixed, I have a significant part of my heritage is a Ukrainian heritage. My grandma was Ukrainian, and of course she gave something to our family. But all together, based on our language, our traditions, we are Estonians, and that's why this fire horses and gods and stuff, we have to look at a little bit bigger picture. And what can I say? All these events definitely influence not only us but also our neighbors, and that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I like to fantasize about those times, and I always, when I walk around, because we have so many of those old, like they are from the medieval times, they are not from 5,000 years ago, but all of those hills, what we have in Tartu, all those old castles or buildings or whatever it's left of them, they kind of like put me all the time in visualizing what life was like in this area specifically where I am at the moment. And it's always so fun to like fantasize about those topics. So that's why this part is all about imagination, because nobody knows what actually happened over there. There are some states, but now if you go to the medieval times, then a lot of information started popping up, which we can actually relate to, right? Because there are more facts and more information sources created, because some of the settlements or some of the nations came in and started doing good and bad things here. And for whatever reason, they wrote it down.
Yes, we have to accept certain self-criticism. So in certain way, based on those days' standards, we were not so highly developed. So the written proofs of our history or written documents, unfortunately or fortunately, exist, we have to say, much thanks to our conquerors. And Liivimaa Henrik, who actually wrote down most of these chronics we can base today, it's actually written from the perspective of people who came and conquered us. Mm-hmm. But yes, I agree that medieval times already much better described. But coming back to this Tartu example you brought, we can imagine actually, at a certain extent, life in Tartu not only from medieval times, because when you go to the Toomemägi, Toome Hill or Dome Hill, it used to be Estonian pagan stronghold as well, before the cathedral was built or before it became very romantic place in 19th century. So Tartu, as a very ancient place, thanks to the river, played significant part. But okay, let's jump to the place where we can use less of our imagination and be more based on written facts as well, medieval times.
So the indigenous population of Estonia was one of the last pagan civilizations in Europe. I like that because pagans, in a romantic way, were cool. I don't know why. They are cool to me, but that's what it is. And then we adopted to Christianity following the Northern Crusades in the 13th century. Then Eastern Slavs tried to get us into the influence sphere of Eastern Church, or Orthodox. Vikings established several states on the territory of nowadays Russia and Ukraine. Novgorod, Kiev, Rus, Pskov, tried several times to gain the territory here. Even the second largest city in Estonia, Tartu, was established by the Duke of Yaroslav and the Duke of Yaroslav the Wise in 1030. Of course, our pagan stronghold existed there for centuries, and we did not like the plan of Yaroslav. So whoever likes changes, right? Nobody. Only Yaroslav liked the changes. So we destroyed their stronghold in 1961. Crusades from the west brought colonists mainly from the German land of Saxony. That is why we call Germans Saxlaset. Later this word meant noble Sax because the language of nobility was German. So Christianity was brought here by the sword and fire. So they came in here as most of the countries or most of the nations brought in their beliefs by force. It started 700 years ago, old love and hate relationship with Germans. So, but not only Germans, other Christian European nations like Danes tried their luck here as well. Danish king Valdemar II finally conquered Tallinn. In our pagan times, we called Kalevilin the town of Kalev, our mythological hero. It was hard battle, so he prayed, and Danish flag Tannenborg, the old still existing flag in use of the world, fell from the sky. It encouraged the Danes, and they won. Tallinn and the North Estonia fell under Danish rule until 1343. Today we are good allies, of course. Who can remember things from 700 years ago? Today we are good allies. Isn't it ironic that we even celebrated Tannenberg Day with Her Majesty Queen of Denmark in 2019, and there is a Danish king garden in our old town? All right, our coat of arms is borrowed from the Danes, three blue lions on the golden shield. So we have adapted, we have learned, we have taken things that make sense to us from our conquerors and made it our own. So I would say that's the first law of nature anyways. You have to adapt, otherwise you will die out.
Yeah, and as Estonians, probably maximum, 100,000 at this time, we had to adapt. But yes, that's probably the only case I could, and I was searching for the similar examples where you celebrate and you are proud of actually of your conqueror's national holiday. And this Dannebrog thing, which is really the oldest existing flag, and when you go to the Holy Spirit Church, Püha Vaimu Church in Old Town, yeah, it's dedicated to this event, and Her Majesty visited several years ago, Queen Margaret II, and we're celebrating it. So we don't feel like any kind of bad feelings or oppression. We are proud, but of course, yes, it's strange that we gave them the flag and we took the coat of arms. So give and take again.
So continuing with the story here, fierce battles between Crusaders and pagan Estonians lasted until 1247. Germans established a state here which covered Estonia and Latvia. Our southern neighbors Latvians already fell under German rule, and our closest relatives Livs, that is where the name Livonia comes from. I mean, nobody understands what it means. Me not.
Liivimaa.
Liivimaa, all right.
Liivimaa, Livonia, Liivland.
So German Crusaders were allies?
Yeah, to our neighbor nation Leaves. Leaves decided to Kaupo was the leader of Leaves. He decided to join the Germans because he saw the Christianity as a possibility to develop. And pagans for him was the people who didn't want to adapt, didn't want to move forward. Lembitu said, hey, I disagree with this idea, and two very close nations started to fight on the different sides.
And today there are only 150 Leaves left and none of the native speakers. Ironically, our ancient leader Lembitu and Liv's ancient leader Kaupo fell both in the Madisepeva battle against each other in 1217. In this battle, Estonians got the silver medal. So we got very good medal, but we came second. We have won Battle of Ümera River and several others, but it did not change the bigger picture anymore. Our countries were not united, the modern state did not exist, and the Western Europe was more developed. So Crusaders decided new Christian territory to the Virgin Mary, Maryland, Maarjamaa. Our highest award at the moment is also Maarjamaa Rist, Order of the Cross of Terra Mariana. So Mariana?
Terra Mariana, yes, Maryland.
And which means that we have adopted things from a very, very old times and still...
Yeah, our conquerors conquered our land, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and we decided that our highest award today, after regaining the independence, is the Cross of Maarjamaa.
When Estonia restored independence in 1991, Maryland National Guard was and still is an important ally of our defense forces. Very interesting fact.
Maryland and Maarjamaa. So it's the only two allies who actually can, again, share even the same name. One state in the United States, and the romantic name of Estonia is the same. It's a Maryland.
Yep. The idea to have new landlords was not highly liked by Estonian pagans nobles. Some of them joined the new faith and traditional voluntarily, so the biggest uprising against Crusaders started on St. George Day on 23rd of April, 1343. A fire started in the country close to Tallinn, and that was a signal. It was a massive. Danes sold their northern Estonian territory to the Livonic Order. Germans finally managed to push it down 1345. We still celebrate our Veterans Day on 23rd of April. Again, we are taking some interesting topics which we celebrate from our history.
We have this like a la carte possibility that we pick up certain things we like.
Absolutely, and that's what you do. Like when you're getting conquered, what else do you have?
Yeah, but this thing, it's really like a first veterans in 1343 we decided to fight again. So that's, I think, it's very romantic. But again, when we think that Jüripäev, which actually means a very important Catholic saint, Saint George, doesn't come very much with the pagan traditions.
And now since 1345, Estonia was tied to a German culture hemisphere since then for the next 600 years. So the cities belonged to the Hansa League, the greatest free trade union at this time. Despite the wars, Tallinn enjoyed prosperity, especially in the 14th and 15th century. The medieval wall, with 22 still existing towers, it's still here in this city where we are doing the podcast. You can come here and visit and see them live. And it draws the attention of visitors. But originally there were 44. Now it's half of them exist. But not only the Germans created a significant minority here, our coasts were Swedish-speaking area, and you can still find Swedish names in the islands and villages despite the fact that this is minority gone since World War II.
Yeah, the only minority who actually completely left Estonia. In 1943, Swedish king had a secret agreement with the Nazi Germany that he can take away the ethnic Swedes, and that's how you can go to Vormsi or Ormsö or Haapsalu, Visby, Daagö, Ösel, Nukke, but only names, only old signs, but unfortunately no Swedish-speaking minority anymore. So
the next chapter or paragraph here, could you maybe add a date to it? Or since the Russian Tsar Ivan IV, the Terrible, our eastern neighbor started to dream to conquer us. Even when Germans were uninvited guests, Estonians became a part of the society of Germans pretty much. Most of the craftsmen in towns were Estonians, but lingua franca was German. Yes, so at this time we cannot speak about the classical serfdom. So Estonians, even as a people, residents of the farmland basically, they still had a right to bear sword, for example, so you could bear it. So the classical serfdom, which in our history we depict like a 700 years of slavery, was not so hard at this time. So Estonians living in the towns were part of this society. Okay, towns and cities, of course, were pretty small compared to today. But Russian Tsar Ivan IV, who was first trying to unite the small Russian entities and territories around Moscow,
he actually went back in history until the same Yaroslav the Wise and said, hey, wait a minute, this town was actually established by my grand whatever father, and we want that you will pay the tribute, which Tartu said, keep on dreaming, and we will not do it. And that's how he started in 15th century, taking part by part, and that was very, very terrible. He probably has been the first Russian sovereign who had created for us something we today take with a mother milk, that this very big danger is coming from the east, because when we jump after several of historical periods, we come to the very, very cruel and bad parts of our history coming from this particular person.
So the Reformation played a significant role for us in the 16th century. Catholic Livonia changed to the Protestant Estonia, and it gave us literacy. You had to be able to read the Bible in our language.
Very practical reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, only a few pages of first Estonian book, which is dated back to 1526, survived, but it brought us symbolically among the civilized nations of Europe. Basic education for kids started, which paved the road to the future. So it's about education, having our language, and having something to base all of that on a paper. So it means that if you write things down, they matter.
Exactly. As a lawyer, I would love to hear, if you write things down, then they matter.
Ivan IV attacked us in Livonian War in 1558 until 1583, and that changed our understanding of brutality. Medieval times were brutal for sure, but the war tactics of Russians, were the Russians at that time, or what they were called?
Moscovites, actually, because Rus, which is an ancient name brought by Scandinavian Vikings to Kiev and Rus. At this time it was Moscovia, and for us in Estonian language and of course in a Latin language, Moscovites, because it was Moscovia for us, and he was the first Tsar of Moscovia.
Okay, and then the Tatars, who were the part of the Moscovite army, was unheard of. So pregnant women were hanged, unborn babies cut out of their wombs, people burned alive, and some fed to angry dogs. Villagers were drowned to blood. That is why you find a lot of places in border regions ending with vere, which means blood. So in the name of our border areas is named by blood. Rakvere, Imavere, Adavere. So Rak blood, Ima blood, Ada blood. Some units of Ivan soldiers had a habit of carrying the head of a dog on his equipment. In our national ethos, Kalevipoeg, you can find some strange evil fighters called koerakoonlased, so dog faces. The connection is clear, and understanding that the worst enemy comes from these since then came with the mother's milk, as you said. Despite his cruelty, Ivan was not successful. Livonian order fell, but the territory went to Sweden, which was superpower of Europe at that time. This period was called the Golden Swedish Era, but there were many grooms who wanted to have Estonian bride. Denmark, even Polish-Lithuanian kingdom influenced us, and even Tartu was part of the Poland for a while. The town flag is still a Polish flag, by the way. Of course. That's something what we can actually see from everything what we have just read, that we have just adopted things that make sense to us.
But we put a symbol of Tartu on this Polish flag.
We make it our own.
We make it our own, yes.
We find a good bicycle, we put the Estonian flag on it. So let's focus now on the Golden Swedish Era. What do you know about that? What would you like to highlight from here?
Now, with this Golden Swedish Era, I, of course, have a little bit personal connection, not because I'm so old, but the high school I was graduated was established by the Swedish king, Gustav II Adolf. That's why we had to learn Swedish. In 1992, when I went to high school, it was the first class after the Soviet occupation where the Swedish language was brought back. So that's the oldest high school still operating from 1631. And 1632, the oldest university in Estonia still functioning was established in Tartu. So Swedish time, even we call it the golden era, which is a little bit controversial because yes, from the educational perspective, it gave a lot. Swedes didn't have a serfdom, they didn't have a slavery like we had for our Estonian people here. So they tried to make the same rules like in rest of the Swedish Empire. However, the local landlords, of course, opposed it much. So from educational perspective, it was a golden time. At the same time, two big waves of famine and diseases spread around across Estonia. So a lot of death. It was not so golden, but as we still remember it from maybe from positive sides, maybe it's logical for humankind, the human brain, that you start to pick out only the positive things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a peaceful time, more or less.
So if something goes wrong, there's always something good.
Yes, and Swedish time, of course, again, bounded us much more to the Western Hemisphere, which was very useful several centuries later.
So to put it in words, Gustav II Adolf played a significant role in our history, and not only ours, during Swedish rule from 1583 until 1710.
Yes.
Estonia especially developed in the field of education. The first high school, Gustav Adolf High School, still operating today, was established in 1631, and Tartu's University in 1632. In Soviet time, it was forbidden until the 1980s to celebrate Tartu's University anniversary from 1632. It had to start 1809 when it was reopened after the Nordic War. The reason was very simple. No university in the USSR can be older than the St. Petersburg University. So the education of the peasants became mandatory for landlords, and the network of rural schools were established. One of the Baroque pearls of Europe, Narva town, was built and served as the summer capital of Sweden. Stockholm was the winter capital. German landlords did not like the Swedish rule. Many of the privileges were gone, and they wanted to enjoy the serfdom rights over the native peasants. Not like in the rest of the Swedish Empire, Sweden made attempts to change it. 80% of the manors became state-owned, and regulations started slowly harmonizing with the rest of the Swedish Empire. So we pretty much adapted to that a lot, or at least that's what was tried to do. But consistent wars stopped it. During the Swedish era, old believers, the fraction of Russian Orthodox Church, settled in Estonia, creating a unique culture on the shore of Lake Peipus, Estonia's biggest lake. Estonia was and is quite liberal towards different nations and cultures who come with peace. And I would say that it's an interesting statement. We are quite liberal towards different nations. Yeah, we didn't really have a choice.
At this time, actually, probably the local peasants who were already settled on the Lake Peipus could have some resistance. But first of all, Estonia was it was not so much population there, of course. And when people are coming with their own traditions and were not like bothering us much, probably we accepted them. But of course, when it comes to the more developed nations from the West, yes, our arguments were much weaker.
Yeah, you don't have anything to say if you didn't have a power at that time.
Exactly.
So the culture developed and harsh economic conditions continued. Tallinn lost its important position as the Hansa town, and huge famine in 1695 to 97 took away 25% of the population. So you can imagine that, like, there was a huge disease coming and everyone was dying because there was no solution.
No solution, no food, no medicine, and we can't forget that the Swedish territory of Estonia, and not only Estonia, Livonia was also part of Swedish Empire, was still not recovered from this Livonian war. So definitely it was very, very harsh conditions. But if we can only speculate, but at least it was some kind of a possibility to go towards more normal development.
So the next era, the Great Northern War and Russian rule. So what would be some of the highlights from your point of view, if you had to think about it?
I think that the highlight was definitely the role of Peter the Great, building of St. Petersburg and this influence on our territory. And of course, next 200 years within Russian Empire, which again took us from the Western Hemisphere for 200 years and put us into the Eastern Hemisphere. I think this breaking point was very important in creating of our national understanding. But also this Russian rule played significant role how we mentally resisted all the attempts to put us in some direction. So how we still being a very small, not very technically or technologically developed nations, how we survived. I think 200 years of this history depicts this very well, why we still are here and who we are.
So the Peter the Great wanted to create an empire, and if you have an empire, obviously you want to absorb new land. They couldn't give up the idea to rule Estonia. By this time, it was obvious that if you control Tallinn, you actually control the trade between Sweden, Baltics, and Russia. So Peter first attacked the Swedish garrison in Narva in 1700s, but lost the first battle. By this name, the first Estonian officers served in Swedish army. So we already started serving in other people's armies just to protect our own land. 1704, Peter I managed to seize Narva and Tartu, deported the whole town population from Estonia. Something he did again in 41, in 49. By the 1710, Sweden was exhausted. Young King Charles XII lost the war. And in 1710, Estonia became part of the Russian Empire until 1917. By the end of the war, maybe 250,000 Estonians were left. So we have done pretty good now.
Yes, when we think that it's approximately 1 million of us in the world, it's a miracle. And that's again, sometimes you have to believe even in situation where the belief is not very reasonable. So by any theoretical, any mathematical recreation of, formulas or whatever approach you take, we shouldn't exist anymore. But we are now 4 times bigger.
Mm-hmm. So now even when we were under the Russian Empire, we had the special privileges of the German nobles were restored, and Estonia stayed very different compared to the rest of the empire. German nobles, many of whom spoke Estonian, gave an important part of Russian science and politics. Admiral von Krusenstern was the first Russian Navy officer, traveled around the globe. Von Bellinghausen discovered Antarctica. Karl Ernst von Baer is the founding father of embryology. Barclay de Tolly was the first Russian Minister of War, who actually led the taking of Paris in the Napoleon Wars. So a lot of history here. The situation of local peasants became terrible. We were slaves. The serfdom rule, which started to disappear in the rest of Europe, stayed here until 1819. So the rest of the Russian Empire, until 1861. For the first time, we got our family names, sometimes chosen by the landlord and directly taken from the German language. Reimann, Rosenfeld were changed during a wave of Estonization in 1930. So we were pretty much assigned, hey, this is your name now.
Yes, and sometimes the names were very mocking and cruel and unpolite, so it depended on the landlord, of course. But coming for a second back to Barclay de Tolly, he's actually buried in the only existing mausoleum in Estonia, in Jõgeveste. And really, he's probably one of the most important military leaders ever been living in Estonia. Even, yes, he has actually Scottish origin, German as his native language, and served Russian Empire. But it again shows that several nations, several people, several whatever nations had huge influence of us. So I think in some way it's always good, not forgetting of course about bad things, but also trying to find all this positive out of this very hard times.
The Russian Empire participated in many wars and it needed the manpower. So imagine now this. The mandatory time to serve in the army was 25 years, and if you were unlucky to be chosen, it meant to chosen for life.
Yes, because at this time, the average life expectancy was probably about 50 years. So if you were chosen about 20 and for next 25 years you stayed in a Russian army, if you were survived, because the wars were constant against Prussia, against Napoleon, against Turks, whatever you can name it. So every village had to give certain amount of nekruts or the people who went to serve.
But we did not forget the desire of freedom. So national awakening started in the middle of 19th century, a famous song festival. Can you imagine that? That's where it started from, which we have until today every 4 years. It started from 1869. The first one celebrated 50 years of individual freedom. But the time started to change. With hard work, it became possible to purchase land, and we had the first farm owners. That was turning the point in our national thinking as well. We started to call ourselves Estonians, not maarahvas, which means the people of the land, like before. Suddenly, we realized that there is one nation on islands, coasts, small towns, and deep forests. Our first romantic poets, Lydia Koidula and Jaak Peterson, started to write the national ethos. Kalevipoeg was written by Friedrich Kreutzwald. The first Estonian newspaper was printed, and our language started to become more and more the language of educated people, but there was a long way to go.
I would like to add that, again, here it was important why the Lutheran faith played important role. Not like in the rest of Russian Empire where the majority couldn't read or write, because ancient Orthodox church, which used ancient Slavic language, most of people didn't understand it, like in Catholic Church with Latin. Protestant faith needed you to read your own Bible. And that's why, and we had this network of schools already. So by the time when this first newspaper was coming, by the time when Kreutzwald was writing his book, so Lydia Koidula, Jaak Peterson, majority of people could at least read. So 2 aastat külakooli or 2 years at the village school was already like a normal standard, which was unheard for the rest of empire. So that's why education, and I'm happy to say that even our company is soon publishing one book,
Yep.
paying tribute to this, it actually saved us for the future. I don't know how many people in 19th century thought about it, but more educated Estonians already were thinking, hey, wait a minute, if we can read and write, that probably will give us some advantage in the future.
The Russian Empire did not like that we were different. Russification policy in the end of 19th century was ridiculous and massive. Even the rural schools had to teach in Russian, even though most of the people did not speak a word of it. Imagine that. Suddenly, Baltic Germans and Estonians understood that the empire does not plan anything good for none of us. But the land issue was not solved. Seeking land and prosperity, many Estonians left the country and established settlements in the southern part of the empire. You can still find some Estonian villages in Caucasus and southern Russia. The capital of empire, St. Petersburg, became the second Estonian city. More Estonians lived there than in Tartu. So we started going in different places. 4th of June, 1884, Estonian students decided to create a symbol of Estonian student society. Like many other nations in Europe, the tricolor flag was chosen blue, representing blue sky, black, the Estonian soil, feeding us and reminding us the hard past, white, pure ideas and bright future. The original flag, hidden during the different occupations, is exhibited in the National Museum nowadays, so you can actually go there in Tartu and actually see it. It's over there. The path towards national determination started. First, farmers who already had some wealth started to send their sons to universities according to the proverb, tarkus tarviline vara. Wisdom is the necessary fortune. Wisdom is the necessary fortune. Thanks to this, after some decades, we had enough people who could lead the nation. In 1905, after Russia was defeated in Russo-Japan War, the massive unrest spread over the empire, especially over the western part, Poland and Baltics. Clashes with Tsar army caused the burning down of hundreds of manors and hundreds of dead and executed people. For the first time, the idea of independence started to grow. Famous Estonian poet Juhan Liiv wrote these days, "But once we will be Estonian state." He was in a mental hospital then, which is weird. Obviously, if you're in a mental hospital, you can blur out things that doesn't make any sense. But now you can see that he already understood what's going on. But who could tell that after dozens of years, it actually will be true?
Yeah, he wrote it then, and really after 12 years, this idea was realized. Movie about him was just released on 18th of October, Vari, The Shadow. And I think Juhan Liiv is probably with his tragic background and his poetry, probably one of the best examples of Estonian controversial poetry and I don't know, literature in general. So Juhan Liiv definitely being crazy, I agree, or mentally ill, I'm sorry, but at the same time, he was brave enough to dream big. So put yourself a goals which are hard to achieve, but dream big, but move towards them.
But isn't it so that people who dream big are considered crazy?
Yes, of course. When you take a Newton or Copernicus or Leonardo da Vinci or whatever, Leonardo da Vinci, who tried to create, I don't know, the first helicopter, in 15th century, 99 point something % of people probably looked at him and wait a minute, please take some medicine.
Yep. So you have to be open-minded.
You have to be open-minded, and Juhan Liiv definitely was.
So the revolution of 1905 marked the rising of Estonian politicians. The city council in Tallinn had many Estonian representatives. First, Estonian judges, lawyers, doctors started to play a significant role in the society. And now we get to the World War I. In 1914, Estonia, as part of Russian Empire, found itself in a devastating war. Baltic Germans, who enjoyed different privileges before, became a suspicious group. Russian Empire needed junior staff officers, so how to find those who are after 6 months of training could become one. Estonia and Latvia, thanks to the widespread literacy provided by thousands of men who later become core of the Estonian military force.
Because the rest of empire, who couldn't read and write, couldn't provide the first level of junior officers, the ensigns, who were desperately needed. And the 6 months courses for ensigns in Vilnius and in different other parts of a Russian Empire actually gave the young Estonian man who coming from not the highest level of society, but possibility to get relatively good education. Laidoner and the rest of the elite of a later Estonian military were actually coming from the peasant families and had opportunity to become officers.
100,000 Estonians, 10% of our population, took part of the First World War. Many rose in ranks. Colonel Laidoner, later General and Head of Estonian Army, General Dodge, General Arka, General Põder, and many others. In 1917, it was obvious that the Russian Empire would collapse. The interim government in St. Petersburg took the power, and the Caesar and the Tsar gave up the power. We understood that it is time to fight for our national interests. While the Russian army was demoralized, Estonian national battalions were disciplined. They organized a huge march in the capital with the Estonian flags, demanding autonomy, which was provided in 1917. But communists made a coup in October 1917, and for us it was obvious it was time to leave the place. Makes sense, right? Bloody civil war between the Reds and the Whites in Russia promised nothing good for us. We did not share any common values with them, and both of them considered us as a lower class people. In 24th of February 1918, Estonia Rescue Committee declared the Declaration of Independence, starting with the words, "Manifests to all Estonian people, no matter your origin, language, culture, religion, free Estonia will be our home." Next day, Estonia was occupied by Imperial German Army, who stayed here until November 1918, when World War I ended and the world changed like it never changed before.
Yes, because time flies, of course, and sometimes we here in Europe forget that actually World War I changed the political map of Europe much more than World War II. So when we think about the states we can find today in Europe, they are all result of collapse of big empires in Europe. Russian Empire, German Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and to a certain extent, of course, the Ottoman Empire as a Turkey as well. So, and we gained the moment. That again, of course, we just use the moment. But that's an excellent thing when you had a long preparation and then you innovate and adapt. You say, okay, wait a minute, now I can do it. Because without preparation, without, I don't know, is it correct to say exercising? But 1905 revolution probably was a form of exercising. We were lucky, but at the same time, if you are just lucky, it's not enough. You have to have work towards this idea. And I think two of these components met, and we use them on.
You have to be prepared when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah.
So, War of Independence. 1918, Germany signed the Surrender Act in World War I.
I would like to add one thing. It was 11:11, and the clock was 11:11.
Really?
Yes, it was very significant and very cruel, because the armistice was put in place 11:11, and the last attacks happened at 11 o'clock, because officers still were giving commands, go to attack. Everything was signed, but they wanted to symbolically end it. And thousands of men, died in the last minutes of World War I just to please someone's ego. And that's unbelievably.
So they wrote or signed the Surrender Act of World War I. German troops started to leave occupied territories, handing the power over to their local authorities, many members of whom were arrested. Most of Estonian governmental institutes celebrate their birthday in November. Defense Forces 16th of November, National Police 12th of November, Defense League 11th of November. We hoped that now, when two historic hostile powers, Imperial Germany and the Imperial Russia, ceased to exist, we could continue on our own, like many other nations in Europe, Poles, Czechs, Finns, Romanians. But already on 28th of November, communists Russia attacked Narva and War of Independence began. The first attack in Narva was repelled with the help of our former enemies, German army.
Very ironically.
Very ironic. Again, if you have a common enemy, you can utilize that. But they were leaving. So Germans were still going out. Red Russia advanced, and the Estonians were tired of the war. 10,000 dead, devastated economy, and little hope that 1 million can fight against 150 million. So the first voluntary mobilized failed. What to do? Never give up. Who joined the troops? Officers who obeyed the orders understood that the Red Russia has many enemies and it is possible to fight. And school students, 15, 16-year-olds, yes. Student battalions played an important role. Every bigger high school in Estonia have commemorative plates. And the famous book, The Names of Marble Plates, Nimed marmortahvlil, was written by Albert Kivikas. Books were forbidden in the Soviet time, of course. Who helped us? Finnish volunteers, British Navy, who closed the Bay of Tallinn to prevent raids arriving from Petrograd, but raids came as close as 20 miles from Tallinn. Raid territory started on the occupied territories, and the local population realized that the workers' paradise really meant. After the first success, men started to join our troops. In January 1919, Estonia started a counterattack, and the first anniversary of Republic was celebrated without enemies on our soil. The fierce battles continued in Latvia and in Russia. June 1919, a new threat appeared. Baltic Germans did not want to give up 700 years of privileges. They saw an opportunity. They declared Grand Duchy in Latvia and wanted to move to Estonia as well. Now the romantic books played the role, possibly to have a revenge on crusaders on the 13th century. Young students literally ran as volunteers to the battalions. 23rd of June, the German Iron Division and Landeswehr lost the battle in Mõnnu, ceases in Latvia, and we have celebrated our Victory Day since then. Our armored trains became a symbol of War of Independence. Ironically, British allies did not allow us to march forward and take the whole of Latvia. Germans were still needed against Reds. So a lot of politics there, a lot of strategies.
That's why we have Valga and Valka. That was also a British decision, as the city will be split, not given to us.
Reds tried some more times, but together with Russians, whites, who by the need became our allies again, we pushed as far as 20 miles from Russian capital, and Red Russia started to seek the way to separate peace. 2nd of February 1920, Estonia became the first country in the world to sign the peace treaty with Red Russia, who promised to give up all the rights on our territory forever. So this is like a fairy tale already.
It was a fairy tale, but the fairy tale, from my understanding, was written by Estonian people. And I mean not only ethnical Estonians, because when you look on the Estonian army structure, or Eesti Rahvavägi at this time, we had, even we were fighting against Baltic Germans, we had a Baltic battalion of Estonian Germans fighting on our side. We had Kachanov divisions or units, which was actually ethnical Russians. We had several hundreds of Estonian Jews fighting for our independence, etc., etc. So it was the idea that, hey, it's still our home, it's our common home. And the possibility we managed to put Red Russia into the position where they had to sign it. Of course, from their perspective, it was a temporary loss. It is a miracle. It is a miracle, and by all standards, by all, assumptions, it couldn't happen. But it happened. It happened because we believed in this idea. And I very much like that the majority of population who actually were under the rage of mobilization in the beginning didn't believe. But then you must have certain leaders. And that is exactly very good when you have leaders from top, official leaders like officers, and then you have leader from down to up. You lead up. Because the young students, 15, 16-year-old from my school, from Gustav Adolf High School, during this year, approximately 800 students went. 9 of them died. And it was not like a part of their leadership. Probably no one of them, a 15, 16-year-old kid, was thought about leadership. But how can you sit at home when you see that your son is taking a rifle and going against the enemy who is more trained, that is much powerful? You actually put this other rest of population, wait a minute, no, I just cannot be here. And in my understanding, that's the best example of a non-formal leadership, leading by example. And that's why it's fairy tale, but this fairy tale ended up very well.
And I would also say here that that kind of shows the power of understanding the vision or having an intent. Like, people understand that they want to be free. That was the goal. That was the vision. Now, opportunity came and you had to try. You didn't know what to do specifically, but you know the direction. The direction is freedom. Now those opportunities present you, so you can make all the decisions based on that intent. I want to be free. Whatever the opportunity comes, now I know what to do and what to make decisions in those situations, because I understand where we are trying to move. If you don't understand that, if you don't have that end goal, if you don't have that intent to become free, then based on what do you make a decision?
Exactly. That's why we say in our trainings, we say to military, and I say to all of my students at the military academies, that the most important question when you're writing the order is the why. Why we are doing this commander intent. And in legal studies, when you open Estonian constitution, actually the whole meaning why this document exists. It's the first page. It's a preamble which says Estonian Republic was created to preserve our culture through the centuries. Full stop. How are we going to do it? How the country is organized? That's the rest of this, all the laws and legal framework. But the reason why, it's only first page. And okay, all of my actions has to lead there. And probably the students and the officers who lead them, they did understand it. And of course, the rest of the nation looked a little bit later, wait a minute. That's really a big goal we should fight for. And of course, when later in April 1919, the land was promised, which was very crucial. You finally become an owner of your land. You take responsibility, because ownership, extreme ownership, means also that you're responsible for all of your decision. It is my land, it's my farm. I cannot blame anyone else. If I'm not working hard, it is not a problem anymore of a landlord. This is my problem, it's my farm. And this giving ownership to the rest of the nation, that was a breaking point of this war of independence, in my understanding.
And then we got independent, 1918. Every start is hard. However, Estonia managed to develop quite fast. In 1924, 1st of December, the Soviet Union organized a communist coup attempt, which quickly failed. Several policemen, military academies, cadets fell, but the republic remained. Agriculture flourished, new markets, especially in the UK, were established, and for the first time in history, Estonia enjoyed the status of equal partner. Of course, The Great Depression in 1930s was hard, and extreme movements, like in rest of Europe, had their place. But the Estonian cultural autonomy law of ethnic minorities, adopted in 1925, is widely recognized as one of the most liberal in the world at the time. Swedes, Russians, Germans, Jews were the main minorities enjoy this autonomy. We became a member of the League of Nations in 1922. USA finally recognized us as the established diplomatic relations, which never stopped after that. Peaceful development probably is the reason why we tend to idolize the period. Our standard of living was the same level as in Finland, and the years after 1935 are considered as the wealthiest in our history. Art Deco, great architects, technological progress. The first world-known mini photo camera Minox was invented in Estonia. 1936, national pride grew. It became popular to Estonianize the names, and Minister Karl Ainbund became Karel Ainpalu. So we started doing Estonia. That's what we started doing. Now, the National Defense League had thousands of volunteer fighters, cultural events, festivals were widespread, sports club popular, and we had our own Olympic champions like wrestler Christian Palusalu, who won 2 gold medals in Berlin in 1936. But it did not last long, sadly. And then the World War II break. A week before outbreak of World War II, on 23rd of August 1939, Nazi Germany and Stalinist Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. In the pact secret protocol, Poland, Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Finland were divided between USSR and Germany into spheres of influence, with Estonia assigned to Soviet sphere. On 24th of September 1939, Stalin represented the Estonian government an ultimatum demanding that Estonia immediately signs a treaty that would allow the USSR to establish military base in Estonia, or else face war. On 14th of June 1940, Soviet Union instituted a full naval and air blockade to Estonia. On 16th of June, the USSR presented an ultimatum demanding completely free passage to the Red Army into Estonia and the establishment of pro-Soviet government. Feeling that resistance was hopeless, the Estonian government complied, and on the next day, the whole country was occupied. On 6th of August 1940, Estonia was annexed by the Soviet Union as the Estonian SSR. It is national shame and mental trauma. Finland resisted and fought in the Winter War, but one battalion, Signal Battalion, refused to lay down the weapons, and one fight took place in Tallinn. Several Reds were killed. Before battalion laid down their arms, we did not surrender without any shot. And then USSR started establishing an repressive wartime regime in occupied Estonia. So we let them come in.
Yes, because we probably went against the first rule of a law of combat, cover and move. We didn't have a clear and strong allies or relationship with our neighbors at this time. Estonia tried to have a kind of a military agreement with Finland, Latvia, and Lithuania, but we didn't play in the same orchestra. Lithuania had a huge dispute with Poland, and the relations were very bad. So Finland was looking towards Sweden more than towards us, and didn't want to bind themselves with a tiny Estonia. Latvia was also trying to please both Estonia and Lithuania, etc. So we failed. With the cover and move. And since 1934, the governing system of Estonia was not very open. Quite many intellectuals saw that the regime of President Pats, it's not the best. So the nation was not united. The understanding of why was not simple, clear, and concise, and cover and move wasn't there. So what can you expect? How can you resist if you are not? And plus, when the war was already obvious, Estonia still tried to some kind of a sneak in between, not taking a clear stance, but you have to make up your mind. You cannot please all of us. You cannot stay neutral all the time when you see that nations you rely on, you try to turn away and say, hey, we don't see what Soviet Union is doing in Finland. At the same time, a winter war was going on. So Estonia was left without strong allies. And of course, that was a result, unfortunately.
And I would also say it's like, as we say, that freedom
is not
doesn't create freedom.
I will disagree with this wording, because freedom creates freedom, but freedom requires a discipline.
Exactly.
So you have to be disciplined to be free. You have to exercise. You have to constantly work on your relations. You had Estonia in 30s was too late to modernizing army. And when we discovered it in 1938, Hitler was already in power. The whole world was understanding that, hey, wait a minute, the war is coming. Czechoslovakia was attacked. Anschluss of Austria was taking place. And when you wake up, oh, now I need to do something. Unfortunately, it's too late, because several years you were not disciplined.
Absolutely. And like it's the saying, and I think it goes very well aligned with that, is that hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create bad times create strong men, and that's the circle. And I would say that we, as a nation at that point, we enjoyed the good times and we got lazy sitting down. We had a lot of problems, obviously. And then our enemies found a weakness and they were moving. They were the fourth aggressive, we were not. So USSR established a repressive wartime regime in occupied Estonia. Many of the country's high-ranking civil and military officials were arrested. Soviet repressions culminated in 14 June 1941 with a mass deportation around 11,000 people to Russia, to Soviet Union. Around 34,000 young Estonian men were forcibly drafted into the Red Army. Fewer than 30% of them survived the war, so about 20,000 people died. Soviet destruction battalions initiated the Earth policy.
Scorched earth policy, so nothing left. Everything was burned down, and that was one of the rules. So Habitus battalion, destructive battalions, that is probably one of the most brutal spot of the World War II in Estonia.
Political prisoners who could not be evacuated were executed by the NKVD. Many Estonians went into the forest, starting an anti-Soviet guerrilla campaign. In July, the German Wehrmacht reached South Estonia. Initially, many Estonians were hopeful that Germany would help to restore Estonian independence, but soon proven to be in vain. Only a puppet collaboration administration was established, and occupied Estonia was merged into
Reichskommissariat Ostland,
with its economy being fully subcharged to German military needs. About 1,000 Estonian Jews who had not managed to leave were almost all quickly killed in 1941. Numerous forced labor camps were established here. Thousands of Estonians, foreign Jews, Romanians, Soviet prisoners of war perished. German occupation authorized started recruiting men into small volunteer units, but as these efforts didn't provide results, and the military situation worsened. Forced conscription was instituted in 1943, eventually leading to formation of Estonian Waffen-SS division. Thousands of Estonians who did not want to fight in the German military secretly escaped to Finland, where many volunteers to fight together with Finns against Soviets. Red Army reached the Estonian borders again in early 1944, but its advance into Estonia was stopped in heavy fighting near Narva for 6 months by German forces, including numerous Estonian units. In March, the Soviet Air Force carried out heavy bombing raids against Tallinn and other Estonian towns. In July, the Soviets started a major offense from the south, forcing the Germans to abandon mainland Estonia in September and the Estonia Islands in November. German forces were retreated from Tallinn. The last pre-war Prime Minister Jüri Uluots appointed a government headed by Otto Thief in an unsuccessful attempt to restore Estonian independence. The clashes between Estonians and Germans' uniforms and German troops took place as Estonians asked to leave the weapons to stop the Soviets. So we wanted to fight again and do the First World War pretty much. The Estonian flag was raised again, but the history of 1980 did not repeat. Tens of thousands of people fled westwards to avoid the new Soviet occupation. Overall, Estonia lost about 25% of its population through deaths, deportation, and evacuations in World War II. And that's where pretty much the Soviet occupation started.
So yeah, the second Soviet occupation started, and probably one of the very tragical part of the World War II that we had approximately 70% of Estonian men fighting in the German units. 30% drafted to the Soviet units, and I think every Estonia family has this personal story. My grandfather from my mother's side was drafted into the Soviet army, but of course was put to the labor camps in Siberia. And his uncle was put to the Wehrmacht Bodeguard regiment. So one family name, but completely different path in a World War II.
I had the same. My great-grandfathers, they both went, first they fought on the side of Germany. Then at some point, one of the great-grandfathers fought on the side of Soviets. Then eventually he fought, so he chose, or he had the ability to, whatever way, fight on the both sides. So yeah, the tragedy was that the Estonians were actually fighting each other.
Because of the not cleverest decisions in 1939. Like Finns started, okay, we're going to fight. We are ready to lose if we have other choice, but at least we took a stance. Estonia tried to avoid it. In the end, the result was the same, but the national shame was already created, and the mental trauma was there. So to took a courage to fight, sometimes it's easier and better than to avoid.
Yeah, it's like when we talk about the barriers of taking ownership, if you don't take ownership, it doesn't change the consequences.
Or like many people are saying now, but also said there, if you are not dealing with politics, it's not my business, I don't deal, then politics will deal with you.
Absolutely. And now one of the last parts is Soviet occupation. Now, 51 years of new life.
Yep, and in between these 51 years, it was 3 years of German Nazi occupation as well.
So, Soviet occupation. Thousands of Estonians opposing the Soviet occupation joined the guerrilla movement known as Forest Brothers. Armed resistance was heaviest in the first years after the war, but Soviet authorities gradually wore it down through attrition, and the resistance effectively ceased to exist in the mid-1950s. The Soviets initiated a policy of collectivization, but as farmers remained opposed to it, a campaign of terror was unleashed. In March 1949, about 20,000 Estonians were deported to Siberia again. My grandfathers both. The Russian-dominated occupation authorities under the Soviet Union began Russification, with hundreds of thousands of ethnic Russians and other Soviet people being included to settle in occupied Estonia, in process which eventually threatened to turn indigenous Estonians into a minority in their own native land. In 1945, Estonians formed 97% of the population, but 50 years later, they shared the population of only 62%. Occupying authorities carried out campaigns of ethnic cleansing, mass deportation of indigenous populations, and mass colonizations by Russian settlers, which led to Estonia losing 3% of its native population. By March 1949, 60,000 people were deported from Estonia and 50,000 from Latvia to gulags systems in Siberia, where death rates were 30%. The occupying regime established an Estonian Communist Party, where Russians were the minority of party membership. Economically, heavy industry was strongly prioritized but did not improve and the well-being of the local population, and caused massive environmental damage through the pollution. Living standards under the Soviet occupation kept falling further behind nearby independent Finland. Islands and most of the coastline areas were turned into a restricted border zones which required a special permit for entry. Estonia was quite closed until the second half of the 1960s, when gradually Estonians began to covertly watch Finnish television. In northern parts of the country, thus getting a better picture of the way of life being behind the Iron Curtain. The majority of Western countries considered the annexation of Estonia by the Soviet Union illegal. Legal continuity of the Estonian state was preserved through the government in exile and the Estonian diplomatic representatives, which Western governments continue to recognize thanks to the US. Our ambassador, Ernst Jackson, worked in the US for 50 years.
Yeah, the grand old man of Estonian diplomacy, which made Soviet Union mad and furious because on every 4th of July you had to greet who? You had to greet Estonian ambassador, the country which you say not exist, but the US say, no, wait a minute, for us, we do not recognize Baltic states as a part of Soviet Union. And that was actually one of the reasons when Moscow Olympic Games in 1980 took place. Not only the reason that it was boycotted because of the war in Afghanistan, but even those countries who went there, many of Western countries did not participate in the sailing competition which took place in Tallinn because it was occupied territory. And that's a very significant thing. So we didn't have to declare independence again. We already had everything working.
So it was a time of deterioration.
It was a time of deterioration, but at the same time, how much you have to believe in this idea that half a century, if you are Ernst Jackson, and you started as a young clerk somewhere at the Estonian embassy in 30s, and now you work for 50 years believing that, hey, one day it will be embassy again. I don't know how much courage, how much faith do you have to have that you are, and he was lucky enough. He saw the final moment. He saw that, hey, now I can hand over the keys of the embassy to the new government.
And now, after the 50 years, independence became restored again. So the introduction of the Soviet central government in 1987 made open political activity possible again in Estonia, which triggered an independence restoration process later known as a Laulev Revolution, so singing revolution. On 23rd of August 1989, about 2 million Estonians, Latvians and Lithuanians participated in a mass demonstration forming a Baltic human chain across 3 countries. During the coup attempt in Moscow, Estonia declared the restoration of independence on August 1991. So, while the singing revolution happened and while there was this Baltic chain, I was already 3 months old.
And I did participate as a young kid at this singing revolution. I remember it was like so packed. Our singing square was so packed, Lauluväljak, so it was hard to find a place. But I was 11, 12. I still remember the feeling. It was like unbelievable. My father took me there, and even as a kid, you probably don't imagine or realize all the aspects, but I felt that something is changing. So at this time, and I think it saved Estonia a lot, this Finnish television, which was mentioned before, that when you came back from school, like in 4th or 5th grade, and you heard all this Soviet nonsense during the history lessons at school, and then you open like a Finnish television, and you see, hey, wait a minute, the world is completely different. So you lived like in a parallel reality. And of course, at this time, people were already open or courage enough that they told you at home that, hey, life is not what you hear there. But for the kid, it was like a disorienting, hey, wait a minute, I have to pretend to be someone at school, and I hear completely different stories at home. But it definitely led the Soviet system to collapse because this world of lies couldn't be eternal for sure. It couldn't last forever.
Soviet authorities recognized Estonian independence on 6th of September 1991, and on September 17th, Estonia was admitted into the United Nations. The last units of Russian army left Estonia 31st of August 1994. They left. 1992, radical economic reforms were launched for switching over to market economy, including
privatization
and currency reform. Estonia had a currency called kroon. crown. Again, everyone could exchange 150 crowns to $12, and that was the
10
start.
euros. 10 euros. So everyone started. Okay, here's the 10 euros. Have a nice way. Go ahead.
That's a good startup capital.
Yeah, but
That's all what we have.
yeah.
In 1938, the purchasing power of wages in Estonia was 4% lower than in Finland. In 1988, after the Soviet Union, it was 42% lower, and by 2018, the gap had fallen to 17%. Since regaining independence in 1991, Estonian foreign policy has been aligned with other Western democracies, and in 2004, Estonia joined both the European Union and NATO. On 1st of January 2011, Estonia joined the Eurozone and adopted the euro, the single currency of the EU. It was hard. Organized crime, unstable 1990s, collapsing economy, but put us to face the challenges. But hard times make good people. We had 81 bomb explosions in gang wars in 1994, 365 homicides, and more than 400 killed in traffic accidents. 23 homicides last year, no explosions, and 55 killed in traffic accidents. The level of trust towards law enforcement was 26, today is 80%. We took risks to adapt and learn from our mistakes. We made many of them. Sometimes we did not check our ego, but we believed in the ultimate cause. Our first prime minister in 1992 was 32-year-old Minister of Defense who managed to negotiate Russians out of our country. Was 26 years old. 26-year-old man negotiating Russians out of our country. The head of national police was 28. When Estonia was full of the
organized crime gangs from all over the former Soviet Union. As a young police officer, I remember the names of the gangs: Krasnodar, Perm, Novosibirsk, Solikamsk, and it's like, whoa, the whole map of Russia was here, robbing banks and doing whatever stuff. And yeah.
We are among the 50 wealthiest nations in the world. We're around 100th place in 1991. We have the cleanest nature in Europe, one of the best environments to raise our kids. The government will guarantee your salary during parental leave for 18 months. We are one of the most digitally advanced countries in Europe and the birthplace of Skype. We are number 12 least corrupt countries in the world, better positioned than Japan or Australia. Or
the US.
Or US. Does it mean that we are perfect? No, the training never stops. So, this is a really brief history of what Eerik has written down. And yeah, this is a fairy tale.
Again, this fairy tale is not written by me. It's only summarized in 14 pages, but the fairy tale was written for thousands and thousands of years of history. And you, Louis, and everyone else has been part of this fairy tale because we all gave our short story for this fairy tale. Everyone from different perspective. Someone coming from long away from the globe, different part of the globe. Someone born here in, I don't know, wild 70s. Someone facing the, like you said, 1989, being a three month-old baby. But we all had our part in this fairy tale. Every one of us. And that's, I think, make us, I don't know, successful maybe.
And I would say the most common thread here is the reason why we are here is someone took ownership of things and started to make things happen. And even if the environment didn't allow you to control because shit happened, now they took ownership of how they reacted to the environment. They found ways how to be default aggressive. They found ways how to innovate and adapt. They found ways how to be humble because they understand that ego doesn't take you in the right places. Then they were disciplined, and the discipline has brought us the freedom we have today. And all of that in my head can be contributed to just amazing leaders, amazing leadership where we are today. I mean, what else, what better world or better story you could actually have? Like where we are at the moment, it's a fairy tale, it's a happy ending at the moment. Now we have to just maintain our discipline, learn from the history, and just continue on. And I think we are on a path to success at the moment.
I agree. And to simplify or to sum it up, Let's take a page or period of the most recent history, this restoring independence 1991, cover and move. So we had to look, okay, who we have as a partners, who are interested in supporting us. US with the principles, our Baltic neighbors, the rest of Central and Eastern Europe. Fine, cover and move. We support you, you support us. Excellent. If we will go and talk hundreds of pages of our tragical history and describe why it was injustice, most of people get tired. So you have to be simple, clear, and concise. Okay, what do you want to achieve? Hey, we want to restore this, we want to achieve this, and we want to do it in this and this and this way. Do you agree? Yes, we understand your idea. It's achievable, we will support you. We had a bunch of problems. We wanted to be there, we wanted to be in certain place. We wanted to be in European Union or economical union at this time. We wanted to be in NATO. But if you start to run towards all the directions, how likely you're going to achieve? No, you have limited resources. And Lennart Meri, who was like a grand mind of this period, definitely said, okay, European Union first, because if we achieve this, it would be quite hard to say for us no for NATO. Prioritize and execute. And of course, Estonia had luck not to rely on only one leader. So not everyone was staring, okay, what are you going to say? So several leaders were brave enough to say, okay, we understand why, we understand the goal, now we take initiative in our field. And decentralized command work. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So everyone understood the why and everyone took a courage to make mistakes. Did we make them? Of course we make a bunch of them. But all four laws of combat, plus of course this mindset, now we are here. Look on unfortunately many examples from the former Soviet Union still struggling. Moldova example from last week, from Sunday elections. You still on the edge, you still have not decided, okay, where you want to be. If you don't understand your clear goal, how likely you're going to achieve it?
So I would say that the main part about there for me is that every leader or the leaders who actually took initiative, they understand the why. The why was freedom, and that's where they move towards. So you have to be able to understand the why and explain the why so people can actually understand why do we do it. So you have to sell the victory. You have to understand what is the end state and then just start moving, because otherwise you can't get there, because it seems impossible to achieve. But it only takes one man, it only takes one step at a time to start moving, and then you have to adapt. You have to get humbled, you have to be disciplined, and maybe you will get your freedom. But only thing what you can do is just try. Take ownership of your shit and just start moving.
And pick your battles. What our first Prime Minister Mart Laar told that if you have so many battles to pick, you have to understand which are the strategic ones, because you can't spread everything. You can't spread all of your resources. And you have to understand that to win the war, there are certain battles which you have to lose. There are certain victories which you will not achieve, but the strategic goals have to be in place.
So as Chuck was saying, if you do tactical steps, you have to think strategic. And how often? 100% of the time.
Yes, exactly.
So this was the first episode of whatever it is. I enjoyed it, I liked it, so we will definitely continue it. If there are some ideas, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, what you would like to hear, we can dig deeper. We will choose some of the topics, whatever those topics will be, and there will be a next episode coming in. I don't know when, but it will come. So thank you for listening, thank you for the conversation, and maybe next time we will talk about something else.
Sure. Thank you, Remo, and have a nice day for everyone.
Bye-bye.